Today, we're going to be covering database maintenance tips and best practices. A little bit deeper dive than last time into the Importacular tool. And if you missed that, there is a recording up on our website that covered our last session. And we're also going to be covering handling duplicates. So not exactly the most exciting topics, but very important in what you need to do to make sure your database is kept clean. So while it's not, like I said, the most exciting topics, we do have great speakers to talk about these things, and it is a necessary thing to make sure that your environment stays nice and clean and you can trust the data that's in your system. So we got Aaron and Nancy to show us the way today. They've both been with us for several years now and provide and have great history and knowledge in Razor's Edge. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron first.
Hi, I'm Erin Fleischman, and as Mark said, I'll be covering the database maintenance best practices, and I'll also be going over a little deeper dive into Importacular. We're going to start with database maintenance best practices. I'm going to switch over here. There we go. So this is a basic maintenance template. It can be used many ways, but I suggest you use it to help you define what your maintenance needs are. It starts with your frequency types. So what do you need to handle daily? You know, what tasks? What tasks need to be done monthly? Here's general audit stuff, and these are the ones that you would basically move into daily, monthly, annually, you know, bi-monthly, whatever your needs are. If you're not sure, I would suggest you do them maybe once a month, see how many you have in the queries. If you don't have enough in your queries, then maybe it's bi-monthly. If you have still a ton of cleanup to do within these, then maybe you need to do it bi-weekly. So it's, you know, you're going to have to work through that. But here's some it will have all these different tasks. These are just some suggestions of things you should be looking for. You know, the deceased, the actions, campaigns, funds and appeals, attributes, table cleanup, query cleanup, reports, exports, mail, business rules, events, security and users, gifts, new staff, former staff, and any appends you do. All this can be scheduled. Once you've got kind of your rhythm of what needs to be handled when, I would say put it on your calendar, calendarize it. You know, you won't need the template, this template anymore. It's just to get you used to it. And it's so, like, if this recurring donors are supposed to be run on the 1st of every month, you know, do it. When you put a number in here, that means you did it for that month. I did this on the 1st. My next one isn't coming up till July 1st. Once you get into that rhythm, you don't have to be maintaining it in a database. You can be doing it on, from your calendar. You'll get your calendar reminder. Hey, you need to run recurring donors 1st of the month. You need to do your recurring donors, for the 15th of the month, that type of thing. This line, the policy and procedure manual, I suggest that monthly you review a section of your policy and procedures manual. Every month, pick a section. If it's a small section, maybe you take 2 sections and review it. Make sure it's still up to date. Make sure that what you wrote, 5 years ago is still accurate. If you do this, then every year your policy and procedure manual will stay up to date, will stay relevant for people to use. Make sure your policy and procedure manual is in a place where people can access it easily. Share drive of some kind, whether you use SharePoint or Google Drive or a Google site, whatever it is that works for your organization, because the whole purpose of a policy and procedure manual is for people to be able to reference it and if they have questions and get their answers quickly and easily so they can help themselves. So, pledge reminders. If you do them on the 15th of every month, when you run it, you put the 15th in and, make sure you get those done. Pledge reminders, you're leaving money on the table if you're not sending out your pledge reminders and keeping people up to date and, out of sight, out of mind. Make sure they know whether you're doing them, snail mail or whether you're emailing those. Make sure you get those done. Like I said, these are just a lot of different places where you should be looking at things. Keeping your database clean, keeping it pristine. So when you're doing a mailing or a e-blast or any of those things, that your data supports what you're doing for what you need it to do. Any questions on this maintenance template?
Nothing yet, but again, feel free to send your questions through the Q&A section and we'll get to them when we can.
Okay. One of the things I would also say, is some of these you may want to do as one-offs. Like if you've got a huge end of the year mailing going out, maybe you want to double check all your address ones, as a one-off, just to make sure that everything's good and ready and pristine for that mailing. I see we have some in the chat. Mark, did you want to grab that?
Got it.
Okay.
We will be sharing the spreadsheet afterwards.
Other things to review, obviously, you want to review your tables. Make sure they're clean, that everything's in it, that everything's active. I like to sort mine in alphabetical order if they're small lists. If there's a lot of data in your table, move like the top 5 to the very top, alphabetize the rest and move the top 5 to the top so that people see those first. Inactivate things that don't need to be there. Get them out of the way. Keep it clean, keep it simple. I would say, if the table entry has no value to you, whether it's historically or currently, think about, doing a query to find those inactive entries and delete them off records so you can delete it out of the table rather than just inactivating it. Periodically review your query table. This is one that gets overlooked a great deal. And basically what you want to do is look for any global changes or global exceptions that are more than 30 days old. If you haven't had to go back and use your query from a global change or global exception in 30 days, you probably don't need to. Get it out of there. I like to actually create a folder in the query folder for exceptions and changes. And then all of them are in the same spot. I can go through and sort them by most recent date used and delete multiples all at once, clean it out, get rid of them. It keeps your query section clean. The other thing you want to look at is through all your different folders within queries, any queries that haven't been run in the past 12 months. If they haven't been used in a year, do you really need it in the system? If you're not the owner of that query, maybe you sort the queries by who created them or who uses them and send it to them and say, here's a list of your queries. If you want to keep any of these queries, let me know by this date, this time. Otherwise, on this date, they will be deleted. And do the same thing when you're in reports and exports. If you see things that are not being used, haven't been used in a long time, send the owners emails. If you don't have a response by this date, this time, it will be deleted on this date.
And there was
Any
a question in the
questions?
chat about, does that stand for queries created from imports as well?
Yes. Yes.
Thanks.
If your query created from an import if your import is successful and you validated your data and you have no reason to go back to find those records, to do something with those records, to reverse what you imported, anything like that, absolutely, it refers to those queries as well. Any other questions so far?
Not yet.
Okay. The other things that I would, for me, that are important, obviously exports and mails, keep those clean. Business rules review. Naming consistent. I have this under events, but it's actually something that applies to exports, reports, dashboards, queries. You need to have a naming convention set up for your organization that standardizes how things are set up, what the naming convention is, whether it's an event or a query or an export, so that it makes sense and anybody looking at it can understand what it is, what it's for, how it's used. For instance, in queries, I like to start all my queries that are for a dashboard with a DSHBD for dashboard, RPT for a report, EXP for an export, that type of thing. And then a dash, and then the name of the query, the export, etc., the report that it's supporting. I also like to keep that name within the export and the report and so forth, that the name matches the query. So it keeps it really clean and clear as to what query or supports what export, or what query supports what report, etc. Any questions on that part?
There was a question. Is there a way to delete, and do you know of a way to delete more than one query at a time? And then it actually looks like someone already responded with yes, and query tools delete multiple. So look at that.
Yes.
Groupthink. Well done.
Well done. And yes. So
That's how
great.
it is.
See? No, that's how there should be. Train staff members. Training your staff members that helps you keep your data clean. If they understand the policies and the procedures, if they understand that the data in that database is not just your responsibility, but their responsibility as well. If you're having data integrity issues, it's probably an indication that you need to do more training, either with a specific team member or with your group as a whole. Or maybe you just need to adjust your data entry procedures. So take that into consideration. Make sure your staff members are up to date, that if there are changes made in how something is done, that there is a change management process that goes out and people are notified ahead of time. Here are the upcoming changes. They will go into effect, such and such a date. Make sure people are aware, because last thing you want is to make a change that for whatever reason you missed how it impacts somebody else in your organization. And we all know the pebble in the pond. You drop it in and those ripples go out and touch everything. You need to make sure that you're being proactive in dispersing that ripple, that everybody is aware and knows what's coming before it happens, and that they understand what the new process and procedure will be. And from time to time, revisit your staff onboarding checklist. Check data permissions, check access, usernames, passwords, training. If people have changed jobs, did you update their data permissions? Did you update the training they needed? Those are, ways you can be preemptive in protecting your data. Any other questions so far?
Nope, good stuff.
Okay.
And I just shared a link to the spreadsheet in the chat as well for the folks on the call.
Cool. All right. So if you decide to create one of these without using this, you kind of want a column for frequency and type, daily, weekly, monthly, bi-monthly, annually, quarterly, whatever. What are the tasks that you routinely have to do, that you want to maintain, that you want to make sure are clean, that, you have issues in, those kinds of things. So, you can use this as a template. Mark shared the link to it. This will help you tremendously. If you know your data well enough, start assigning the task to one of the frequency labels. Get it on your calendar it out. As you complete each maintenance piece, record it in your spreadsheet until it becomes ingrained. Integrate it with your calendar. Make it an action for you to do and mark it off that it's completed. Whatever it takes to make sure that you are handling what you need to do. The other part is within Razor's Edge. Make sure you have a query for each of your maintenance items. Create a maintenance query folder with an indicator at the front of the query name to indicate its frequency, whether, like pledge reminders is a monthly thing. Maybe you put an M- for monthly. And with that, I'm actually going to transition. Are you seeing my Razor's Edge now? Or are you seeing my spreadsheet?
Razor's Edge. Yep.
Awesome. Cool. All right. I'm actually going to go up and into my query. And here's my maintenance folder. So I'm saying that every day I'm going to run a query to look for blank REIDs, because a blank REID should not happen in my database. Monthly might be the address with a city but no state, or the constituent code is blank, or here's the pledge reminders for next month. But this indicates how frequently they need to be run. And if you keep your queries in order by name, all your dailies will be together, all your monthlies will be together, etc. So just a tip on maybe how to organize things that way. Any questions? Okay.
All good.
All right. Okay, so now we're going to move into the Importacular. And with Importacular, we kind of rushed through it the last time. So I just want to touch on a few points here. So Importacular is a plugin. It's a third-party app that for the basic Importacular is free if you've never used it. It's a great tool for people who deal with like Benevity or CyberSource, where you're getting a spreadsheet of donors or new constituents or whatever that is consistent time over time. And instead of having to go through the import and redo the spreadsheet every time you need to import it, Importacular, actually you build a template for your spreadsheet. And then once that is built, you can use it over and over and over without having to do your spreadsheet every month. All you have is your spreadsheet. You come in here, you connect it to your Importacular, and you're ready to go. It's great. Like I said, for people who deal with like Benevity or CyberSource or any third-party app where you're getting an Excel file The basics on this are free. So to import a constituent, import gifts, those are free. There are other options that cost. Let's see if I can import file. Let's see if I can find a file fairly quickly without. So here's where it comes up to my mapping. You can either hit the plus and create your own mapping, or if you've already got, one created, you can do that. I'm going to go in and we're going to modify. That's the pencil is the edit. With this, you can, as you can see, here's constituents. We already have Bio 1 mapped out. We already have constituent code mapped out. Got constituent attributes. There's many different things that can be added. We've got the address where I've mapped an address, the phone, the email, and gifts. Where we can, gifts, you've got all these different options. A lot of these other ones like education and memberships and participants and stuff, those will cost a nominal fee. But if you don't have the money for, say, a nomadic connection, this is the next best thing. And, at a less costly amount. Don't get me wrong, nomadic, if you can afford it, is awesome. It fully automates and makes it a lot easier. But if you're with an organization where, your budget's tight, this may be an option for you. I'm going to go back to constituents. What I like with this is, one, you can map everything and only have to map it once, and I can reuse it over and over and over. I have clients that are higher ed. For higher ed, you get new students every semester. You get graduating students that are becoming alumni every semester. You can create a template that you can just connect your new spreadsheet, and in they come. It's great. You can also set how the system is going to identify existing constituents. So it's going to look at your spreadsheet, and then it's going to look at RE, and it's going to, say, what do you want me to look at first? Well, if they've never been an RE, constituent ID is probably not the best way to look. You can look first name, last name, address. I usually move that. Or if they're coming from like Luminate, then I may move email to the top because, Luminate is based off of their email, that type of thing. So you get to pick and choose how to do this. And you can add pieces and say, how you want it to match. You get to decide, which is really cool. And within the mapping, you also can tell it, like, the source field name, that's your spreadsheet. What it's pulling from your spreadsheet, and what do you want to make a default setting? So you can choose that as well. So first name, gender, those are coming from spreadsheet. Org name, last name. So key indicator, since I don't actually have a column in my spreadsheet called key indicator, I'm telling it to look at the org name column. And this being green says that I've done some additional settings. So what I'm saying is, if it's an I, it's gonna make it an individual, key indicator individual. If it's an O, all the O's are going to be organizations. If it's not an O, then it's an I. So you don't have to worry about adding a column for that. On last name, That is just, I want it to be proper case. So if somebody typed in all caps or somebody typed in all small or however they did it, I want it to be in proper case format. So you don't have to worry about going through and cleaning your spreadsheet. You can do that with everything. This column here, the required, if it has a green check, you have to have something there or it will not run. So any questions so far?
All good, it looks like.
Okay, cool. So if you change anything, you want to name it. You know, I always do bio 1 because this is kind of your bio 1 information. Everything else, like if I open constituent code, you can now see that this is constituent code, but it's linked with my bio 1. And I did the same thing here. My code, I use the org name, and I'm saying if the target has a corporate org name, make it corporate or business. If it doesn't, make it a donor. So it'll automatically go through and do that for me. And same thing, I mean, if you're not sure, create yourself a little test, Excel spreadsheet and tie it in and play with this. You will have to go in and activate your account, but it's not hard and they're really easy to work with. And just go through, like, see, everything gets tied back to my bio 1. I name my templates by the purpose. So, if it's a new alumni import, I call the template new alumni and do everything within that template based on the new alumni import. If it's for new students, I would name it new students. If it's CyberSource, I would name it CyberSource gifts, etc. Any questions? All right. Once you get through all that and you save and close your template, in order to get any further, you do have to have a control report. And you can create one on the fly. You don't have to have it pre-done. I would recommend that you only process the first 2 lines the first couple times until you get used to it. Make sure everything's going where you want it. Once you've got it, then I would also say click these just so you have the queries to go with what you want to do. When you continue, it's going to actually kind of go through and check all your data against your spreadsheet. And it's going to tell you, okay, I'm going to update these records. And here are the tabs that actually show up: create, decide, ignore, or update. When you're importing new people, you might have some that come up decide. If you have any decides in action to take, you must resolve those decides before the system will let you proceed further. Your actions to take must all be create, ignore, or update for it to proceed. So your decides mean that maybe they found something that's a possible match. So maybe the address matched or the last name matched or something like that based on what you told it to match on. So make sure you get all your decides handled. And I would work in small batches. If you've got, a file of 5,000, maybe break it down into 1,200 or 1,500 a piece, because you have to do this whole process in one sitting. So you have to go through and find all your decides, do all your changes. When you validate, it's going to tell you red triangles mean you've got a problem. I've got 6 exceptions. You need to go into your control report and look at what those exceptions are and why they happened. And that will tell you like what the problem was. When you get there, I'm just going to open our control report. It's pretty self-explanatory when it opens. When you click on the exceptions tab, it's column B. I usually like spread it out and then click wrap text. So from the error reported from RE on saving map gifts, reported unable to assign the value annual to the fund field. So I didn't map my funds correctly. And it looks like all of these hit that. So something easily, so this will tell you if you have to go back to your mapping or back to your spreadsheet to make sure that, if you have a fund in your spreadsheet, make sure it matches the fund in RE exactly. Otherwise, it's going to say, I'm not finding this. What do you want me to do with it? Any questions?
Nope, not this time.
All right. Well, for me, that's pretty much, what I've got for you. Make sure that, you always do a test, a small subset before you do the entire batch. And just remember, this is for, imports that you use over and over and over. That's the beauty of using Importacular as a tool. It's not having to recreate it every time. Within the slide deck that you will get a copy of, there are some resources for Importacular, like the user guide and the knowledge base, and a link to their free training library. So if you're interested, pursue it, learn how to do it. You can do it. And that does it for me. Your next presenter will be Nancy, and Nancy will be taking you through duplicate management.
Awesome. Thanks, Erin.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the duplicate management process in Razor's Edge and Razor's Edge NXT. There are two tools, one that's been tried and true, that's been with the database, Razor's Edge database side since the beginning of time. And it's accessible through the admin menu called Duplicate Constituent Management Tool. And then with NXT under Data Health, Tools Data Health, you can process duplicates through possible duplicates. The Omatic has a wonderful tool called Merge-O-Matic. You can download a trial. We're not reviewing that in this webinar, but it is also a very good tool to use. You have more options. Before you start processing duplicates, you need to consider how and what it is that you're going to be merging and why you're going to be merging. So this slide just says that what you need to consider is, do you want to go from to use as the master record the most recent record created and merge old records into that, which is pretty much best practice because it's the most recent information your constituents have given you. Do you also want to, as a default sorting mechanism, saying, okay, give me the most recent record as a master record. If you have two records created on the same day, what other criteria do you want to use to say, well, this is the master record I want to use versus another? And that's things like who has the more gifts to their record, etc. You also need to consider other integration systems that you have. Are you linked to Luminate Online? And what are the things, what'll happen if you merge and delete a record in Razor's Edge? What happens to the data in the integrated system? So you need to look at your documentation for that type of integration, what happens and how to do that in both systems. You also have to consider whether or not you're merging all the data from a source record into a master record, or just pieces of the data. So if you really don't have duplicate, but one's a senior and one's a junior, you still want them to be separate, but you want to move information across, you can do that in both of these tools, NXT and the database. And the final thing you need to consider is you really need to clean up the records that you were merged into at the end of your process. So for all of this, it's a 2 or 3 step process, because neither of the merge, if you have 2 phone numbers, one's a work and one's a home, you're going to get a duplicate. They're different types, but they're the same phone number. So you're going to want to look at the records that you merged into in order to decide, is your data clean? And on the last point on this slide is that when you use the NXT possible duplicates, you will have to do a second step in order to actually remove the from records from your database. We'll look at that. Okay, so the duplicate management tool in the database, pros and cons. Well, it's been there forever and ever. You can merge all or just some of the data from a from record into the to record. And pro is that you can delete the record at the point of merge. You don't have to do a separate process of deleting all the constituents records that were merged from. The big con is that anything that's NXT specific, the database duplicate merge tool will not merge. Specifically, if you've been using attachments, media attachments in NXT, they don't show up in database view and they will not be merged. So if you delete or merge a record in database view that had NXT attachments and you delete that record, those attachments are gone. The data is gone. You won't have it. So you need to consider how you're using NXT and determine what steps you need to do first. You need the NXT merge first, then the database duplicate merge tool, all these different things, because Razor's Edge, they're building so much more into NXT, but it's not all there yet. Another con is there are a lot of false positives in the database duplicate management tool. So you're going to be doing a lot of clicks. The algorithm for the database duplicates is not the same algorithm used for the NXT duplicates. So you'll find, don't be alarmed. Yes, there's going to be a lot of not a duplicate click. And the other con is that in order to scan your database, the database administrator has to manually start the process to say, I want to search for duplicates. I have to manually start it. It's not a continuous thing. And also in here is a link to a knowledge base article. So this is how you get to it in the database view. You go to admin on the left and duplicate constituent management up here, and you pop up this menu. So now I'm going to bring that up. Do y'all see my Razor's Edge?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so from here you go to admin, duplicate constituent management tool. Here's a pop-up screen. You can start a new search, or you can open one that you may be working on, because there's thousands and thousands of them. You can do just individuals or just organizations. I'm just going to open up the previous results of one I did. This is a sample database, so it is definitely not going to be as big as what you will see, very possibly. So here's the list, the number of possible duplicates, and on the right, you'll see a master record and a possible duplicate record. What's nice thing about the duplicate management is you can set the sort order in which you want to see and which one you consider is the master record. So here's what I was talking about. The consideration you need is by default, which one are you going to consider the master record? I'm going to say the newest record. And then within the same record, which one is going to be considered the master record? And you can change these. I'll show you this. Do you want to include inactive records or deceased records as possible duplicates? Yes or no? If they're inactive, I'm going to say no. because I've inactivated them for a reason. Okay, you can sort the list by name. That's also useful if, like I said, there's thousands and it's going to take multiple days to process. You can track, manually track, okay, this was the last one I worked on at the end of the day, so I'll go work on this one on the next day. So when you come over here and you click on, you've got a master record, you've got a possible duplicate, it gives you some relevant information. Here's the date, the last change date. You look at this information, does it the same home phone number? This one has the email, that one doesn't. These has 2 gifts, this has 1 gift, but still, this looks like they are duplicates. I'm going to merge into the master record and this guy is going to be gone. So constituent 6309 is going to disappear when I could select individual pieces, or I want to merge all the pieces from 6309 into 14460. I want to include soft credits that he may have, and I'm going to delete the source, and I click merge now. Are you sure? You say yes. Here's that warning saying any NXT specific data will not be merged. So please see this knowledge base. Do you want to proceed? Yes. And then it does the merge and 6309 is gone. Now, sometimes you'll get multiple possibilities like this. And once again, the master record is the most recent record created. When you get multiple possibilities, you have to determine what you're going to do with this whole list. So the next time that you run duplicate management, if you click not duplicate, that record will not be considered a duplicate of anything else that it found again. So if I say this one's not a duplicate, it's not a duplicate of the master record. And said, are you sure? And I say yes, but this one is a duplicate that I can just merge into that record. Once again, take everything over, delete the source, merge now. And that's pretty much the whole thing. That just stays on the screen. Any questions so far?
There was one question. If a merged record has a tokenized credit card on the Bio 2 tab or on an active recurring gift, will the tokenized credit card information make it onto the record?
That I am going to have to research. Erin, do you know?
I would have to research that as well.
Yeah,
We will get back to you on that one. Yeah, I was like, oh, that's a very specific use case. We'll get back to you on that.
And I see another question on how do you know if there's an attachment in database in NXT? That is also a good question. I believe for the recent word that Razor's Edge released a query to figure that out in NXT. Once again, that's something I'll have to, I know that 6 months ago, there was no way. They didn't have the ability to find out if a record in NXT had attachments from list or anything like that. But let me research that as well. They've come up with something.
Yeah, the only thing I've heard, Nancy, is to literally have your NXT open and look.
At the time that you're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always
Okay.
good to check. They change things on us frequently.
Yeah, they do. They do.
There's one more question. When do you clean up the new master record you just merged everything into?
What I do is I have a query that says I want to look at all the records that I've touched with my last change date from a certain date forward. So if I started this on Monday and it takes me 3 days to complete the list, then I want to look at all records I've touched since Monday. Or at the end of the day, allocate 2 hours every day to clean this list, and then another 2 hours to clean up the merged from. So you can just put it as part of your duplicate processing process and just allocate time to do it at the end of the day. That's how I do it. Okay, so let's move on to NXT. What is this? So the pros and cons of using NXT possible duplicates. It's a very intuitive interface. It has nice icons. It gives you the quality of the match right away. And it's very useful. It's much more user-friendly. And it does a continuous check for duplicates in your system, not just a one-off process and have to do it again. The cons, just like the database, is it doesn't merge all the information from the records. And you'll see that, but it's constant. Blackbaud is constantly adding functionality. So as time goes on, you'll see that information about volunteers and memberships will be part of the merge process, but right now they're not. And another con is it's a two-step process. You have to go back into database and actually delete the constituent records, which is a very scary thing for most people to do a global delete on constituent records. But to remove them from your database and reduce your record count for the threshold for subscribers, then that's something you want to do. And here's a link. To get to the NXT duplicates, you go through Tools, Data Health, and then listed here down at the bottom, you get possible duplicates. It tells you the date it last completed a scan, and then how many possible duplicates it has encountered in your database. And let's go ahead and do this. And okay, so once again, it's a test database, data health. And down here, here's possible duplicates. It did it today. Click into there. And here they are. Has a match likelihood of up to 3 dots. And then it tells you with these nice icons, what did it match on? Well, the name and the address. Or go down, just a name. Type here is the likelihood 1, 2, or 3. You can sort this list, which is very useful. Let's say it's several hundred long. How do you want to sort? I always sort match likelihood high to low, because that means that I'm processing the most likely matches first. And as time goes on, then I can process ones that don't match so much. Here we look at this. Sure enough, Marissa, they look like they're duplicates. I go here, I can either say these are not duplicates and the records will be removed from the list, or I have to go into compare records in order to make more determination. The note here, it's the source record over here and the target record over here. In NXT, you don't have the option to say by default, I want the most recent record. You don't have that ability. So if that's your process, if that's what you're going to do, then you need to go here and say view constituent properties. Then it shows you the date added, when it was last changed, some more information on both records. The date added was 5/27, 4/14. Well, this is saying this one is the target record, but I said that I always want my most recent record to be my source record, to be the target record. So I go into here, say select data to merge, and I can switch. I can switch my source and target. So now I'm going to take this and merge it into this record. And here's all the pieces of information that will be merged. Once again, if the data isn't in this list, it will not be merged, and they'll have to go into the database view and do the merge it yourself. This record will be marked inactive. Source record will be marked inactive, and the data will be merged into the target record. And I can say merge records. And going down further down, note these two doesn't have much information, but that's a really unusual name. So very likely they are the same record. I can just go in and do the merge that way. Now, when I do a merge, what happens is the merged from the source record gets listed here. So these are all the ones that were marked inactive and their data merged into a target record. What I need to do to make sure that these records get removed from Razor's Edge completely, I need to create a list. And so I hit, so I'm going to take all of these, create a list of source records. Here they are. I do a save as a static query in database view. I'll say test. I'll just call this test. Save it. And then when I go into database view under query, RENXT, there's my test query that I just created. It has 2 records. It's a static query. There's no, just tells me 2. This is the query that I'd want to use and delete the records from the database, globally delete. Constituents, choose my query. Yeah, this is the one I just created right there. Now, under the delete constituents, you can say, well, maybe I really don't want to delete these records if they have any gifts. So it tells you if in this query, any of the constituents meet these criteria, don't delete it and let me process it first, look at it manually before I say, yes, go ahead and delete it. If they're a solicitor, yeah, go ahead and delete it. If they have business relationships, go ahead and delete it. But if they have any of these other things still on the record, don't delete it. And then click delete now. You can run a pre-report, delete the records, get exceptions, etc. Any questions?
None currently.
Well, that concludes my
Good stuff.
Of duplicates.
All right. If you go one more slide, there we go. Yeah, if you have any other questions, definitely don't hesitate to drop them in the chat or the Q&A for as we're wrapping up here, but also there's our contact information. We will be sharing out the recording of this along with the slide deck and Aaron's spreadsheet afterwards. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions at all, but thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you very much, Aaron and Nancy, for all the information. Have a great day, everyone.